Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a seriously chilling story of betrayal, the supernatural, and ultimate justice. We're looking at the mystery of Dak Gar, or the post office. This whole thing centers on a guy named Mahesh. He's just a regular guy who lands a new gig as a village postman, armed with his bag and a whole lot of optimism. But as we're going to see, Mahesh is walking directly into a terrifying, completely unsolved mystery hidden deep within a dark jungle.
So, on his very first morning, Mahesh stops by a local tea stall. He's just trying to get his bearings, right? Grab a cup of chai. But instead of a warm welcome, he gets hit with this chilling warning. They tell him whoever takes this job either refuses to stay the night or literally runs away the very next day. The villagers are just staring at him in sheer disbelief when they find out he's the new postman. So, the stakes instantly set. Mahesh isn't just taking on some standard mail route here, he's stepping into a cursed role that has absolutely terrified everyone who came before him.
Let's actually look at what Mahesh is walking into. This post office is incredibly isolated. I mean, smack dab in the middle of a dense jungle, isolated. And it gets worse. He's assigned this assistant, an older guy named Raju. Well, Raju flat out refuses to stay in the building after dark. He basically tells Mahesh he'd rather be fired than spend a single night there. So Mahesh is left entirely alone. He's surrounded by dusty shelves, old books, and just this heavy, suffocating silence. He tries to brush it off, He reads a book in bed, trying to convince himself it's just the quiet of the jungle. And then the silence breaks. Thring, thring, a piercing sound, right outside his window in the dead of night. Okay, this wasn't just some random bump in the night. It was a calculated sensory escalation, like a literal symphony of terror. First, right around midnight, the howling of jackals starts up. Then, out of nowhere, the village dogs start barking incredibly aggressively, like they're chasing something unseen. Next, the sound of heavy, labored breathing directly outside his door. And finally, the thing that ties it all together, the relentless ringing of a bicycle bell, accompanied by the rhythmic creak of pedals. Mahesh is totally paralyzed. He's hiding under his covers, hands clamped over his ears, just sweating through the entire night. Now, while Mahesh is absolutely terrified inside the post office, a completely different trap is springing out in the jungle. A local man, Vipul, gets this mysterious letter at his door, and it's delivered along with the distinct sound of a bicycle bell. This letter preys perfectly on Vipul's financial desperation. It's offering him a quick payday for a midnight meeting out at the old banyan tree behind the post office.
I mean, think about this amount, 5,000 rupees. It's remarkably meager. But it highlights something super profound about the villains in this village. See, Vipul is a greedy man. He's easily manipulated by the promise of quick cash. He ignores all the glaring red flags, the late hour, the mysterious sender, the downright eerie bicycle bell following him on the jungle path. He ignores it all, just for this tiny payout. It shows you exactly how cheaply human life and loyalty were valued by the people involved in this dark secret.
And unfortunately for them, that greed leads directly into a timeline of absolute terror. See, this wasn't some mindless haunting. The entity operating in the jungle was on a strictly calculated schedule. Let's break it down. On night 1, Vipul goes to the banyan tree and is brutally mauled to death by what looks like a pack of dogs led by a phantom cyclist. Then, on night 2, the village chief's daughter, Nupur, and her husband, Baldev, get a very similar letter. But theirs promises that their hidden sins will be exposed unless they meet at midnight. They go, and within 15 minutes they meet the exact same gruesome fate.
Which brings us to a huge turning point for our protagonist. Mahesh actually hears the screams on night 2 and runs out into the jungle. He even catches a brief glimpse of the phantom cyclist before tripping and hitting his head. But the next morning, amidst all the horror of the villagers and the grieving village chief, Mahesh finds something crucial. He finds the bloody letters left right near the bodies. And suddenly, Mahesh transitions from this terrified victim hiding under his blankets to a determined, albeit accidental, investigator. He realizes, wait a minute, these aren't random animal attacks. Someone or something is sending these letters.
So, Mahesh demands answers from the village chief, and finally, the dark history of the post office comes to light. And this brings us to Aryaman. Aryaman was a local boy raised by a hard-working, widowed mother. He studied incredibly hard, made his mother proud, and actually became the village's very first educated postman. But his success was cut tragically short. His heavily mutilated body was found out in the jungle, a tragedy the village hastily covered up as a wild animal attack. And ever since then, not a single postman has been able to stay.
But the big question staring us right in the face is this. Why did Aryaman's spirit return specifically to the post office? Why haunt the new postman? And why target Vipul, Nupur, and Baldev? To understand the ghost, we absolutely have to understand the motive. So Mahesh decides to stand his ground on the third night. He waits at the post office door, totally pushing past his fear. And the ghost of Aryaman actually approaches him. It leaves him a final letter that reveals absolutely everything. And it turns out the whole tragedy boils down to two entirely contrasting motives. Aryaman's letter explains the housing dispute that ultimately ended his life. On one side, you've got Aryaman, who was driven purely by love. He had saved his salary for years, even sold his ancestral land, all to buy the biggest house in the village so his mother could live like a queen. But on the other side, you have the Mukhya, the village chief, driven entirely by greed. The chief wanted to keep Aryaman's cash, steal the property papers, and give that exact same house to his own daughter, Nupur. Aryaman's letter details the exact sequence of the betrayal, and suddenly, it all clicks into place. The chief brought his son-in-law Baldev and a hired thug, Vipul, to the post office under the guise of signing the property papers. While Aryaman, completely trusting them, was busy with the paperwork, the chief signaled Vipul. Vipul struck Aryaman from behind with a heavy stick. They stole his life savings, took the papers, and dumped his body under the banyan tree, letting the wild dogs cover up their crime. So you see, every single person the ghost targeted was directly, intimately involved in his murder.
There's a quote from Aryaman's letter that is just absolutely heartbreaking. He wrote, "I wanted the truth of the Mukhya's greed and my blood to come out." Think about that for a second. He wasn't haunting the post office just to mindlessly scare people away. He was desperately trying to communicate. He was just waiting for a postman brave enough to stay, brave enough to actually read the letters, and brave enough to expose the corrupt village chief to the rest of the world.
Mahesh, now fully armed with the truth, is furious. So he enacts this brilliant three-step sting operation. Step 1, he confidently marches right up to the village chief and claims he's hired an incredibly powerful tantric to banish the ghost forever, and he invites the chief to watch. Step 2, the chief, who is obviously thrilled that his problem is supposedly going away, shows up at the dark post office. But step 3 is the real kicker. Mahesh has secretly hidden the Kotwal, the local police officer, right there in the shadows to witness exactly what's about to go down.
As the chief is waiting for this fake tantric, the sound returns. Dring, dring. The bicycle bell rings out, but this time, Mahesh isn't the one who needs to be afraid. He is firmly in control of the situation. Aryaman's spirit materializes right in front of them, and the village chief, he completely loses his mind in terror. He starts screaming at Mahesh, and in his absolute panic, he shouts a fatal confession. He yells, "If I tell anyone I killed him, you won't leave me alive." Without even realizing it, the chief has just loudly and very publicly confessed to the premeditated murder of Aryaman. And right on cue, the police officer steps out from the shadows. He's heard every single word. The chief realizes he's been caught red-handed and tries to make a run for it into the jungle. But Aryaman is completely done waiting for human courts. In this swift, crazy act of supernatural karma, the spirit lifts the terrified village chief high into the air. He drops him from a massive height, and the chief meets his demise in the exact same spot in the jungle where he had so callously dumped Aryaman's body years prior. Talk about an ironic circle of vengeance, right? It's completely closed. We finally arrive at a really satisfying resolution. The police officially record Mahesh's statement, and the truth of this massive conspiracy is exposed to the entire village. But most importantly, Aryaman's mother is legally handed the deeds to the large house that her son had bought for her with his life's blood. Obviously, she is heartbroken over the loss of her boy, but she finally has the peace of knowing his dream for her actually came true. And as for Mahesh, he stays on as the village postman, completely undisturbed. Because now, when Mahesh hears that bicycle bell ringing in the night, he doesn't hide under his covers anymore. He knows it's just Aryaman, riding his route, expressing his eternal gratitude to the one postman who finally stopped to listen. So, I want to leave you with this thought to reflect on. If you heard a ghostly bell in the dead of night, would you run in absolute terror, or would you be brave enough to stay and hear its story? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's hiding in the shadows.